Cool. All right, guys, welcome. Thank you guys for making some time on a weekend. And we're going to be talking a little bit about strength training for rank. A little bit of background. I am Dr. Jordan Tsai, or Doc Respawn for those who know me online. I'm a physical therapist, orthopedic specialist. I've worked with professional esports teams for 6 years plus, although currently not with any teams. But yeah, I have a lot of experience in working with competitive esports players in a variety of games from League of Legends, Valorant, Fortnite. I mean, you name it, I've probably worked with them, mostly PC gamers. But yeah, worked some very high level players, multiple champions, and just wanted to give some thoughts today about specific strength training concepts and give you guys a little bit of easy education. So hopefully you can get into your own fitness journey without as much, I guess, confusion. Let's get into it. And I do have some time at the end for Q&A. A couple easy things that we're going to talk about today, just in general. Why train? What does training actually give you? Um, I think a lot of times you'll see people online say, "Oh, everyone needs to be healthier to play better," but why? Right? Like, what are the important factors that actually influence how you play? And then we'll talk about the specifics. So, types of reps, sets, all that stuff, periodization, timing, specifically for gamers and esports. So, if you want to get into competitive esports and play at the highest level, there's a lot of factors you have to think about in order to maximize your performance. So, you're not putting yourself at a deficit in trying to, improve in health, because I see that a lot actually. And then at the end, we'll do some Q&A and I'll give you some time to talk about your own questions individually. I'd be happy to give you specific advice or whatever if you have anything that you had questions on. So, why should you train? First, let's talk over different types of training. So, when I think about fitness, right, it's broadly three categories. You have mobility, strength, and cardio. And mobility obviously is important. Stretches, that kind of stuff. It improves your range of motion, decreases muscular tension, which oftentimes builds up while you're playing, and increase positional tolerance. What that means is it increases the amount of time that you're going to be able to stay in the same position without fatigue or irritation building up, right? Everyone knows that when they've been sitting in a chair for a long time, after a few hours, you just don't feel great anymore. Your back's kind of achy, you just kind of feel like you need to get up and move. Stretching relieves a lot of that. So it's important, but it's definitely not what I think is the most important thing when it comes to preventing injuries and stuff like that in gaming. And a lot of stuff you'll see online, it's like, oh, just do stretches, do wrist stretches, do more neck stretches. That's all addressing symptoms, which means that you are trying to resolve issues as they're already developing versus being preemptive and preventing them from occurring. You're trying to reduce irritation, reduce stress, right? And the thing with gaming is it's always going to accrue a certain degree of stress. And when I say stress here, I mean mechanical stress, not emotional stress. So tension on your muscles, fatigue of your muscles, that kind of stuff. All right. Cardio. So cardio is also very important. What are the benefits? It improves cardiovascular endurance, which, as we all know, is predictive of a longer lifespan. It's good for general health. But in terms of gaming, it also improves cognitive performance. So there's a ton of research out there showing that people who have better cardiovascular endurance, cardiovascular health, tend to perform better on cognitive testing, meaning tests that measure reaction time, pattern recognition, decision making speed, accuracy, that kind of stuff. All your brain functions better when you have better cardio. And the reason for that is that your brain primarily functions as a result of blood flow. So the more blood flow, the more oxygenation you're getting to your brain, the more effectively it's going to do what it needs to do. And improve mood. This is a huge one. Although we don't think of mood as being the biggest thing when it comes to game. I mean, actually, most gamers understand tilt is a big factor, right? And when you are tilted, when you're in a bad mood, things are going wrong, you're thinking about extrinsic stuff, you're not going to play as well. And so cardio is a really good way of not just, oh, if I have a bad game, I'm going to go out and go for a walk or go for a run. I'm going to feel better. Yes. But what studies have also shown is that having regular cardiovascular exercise in your routine actually it levels out your general mood. So people oftentimes report feeling a lot more stable when they do regular cardio. And the effects of that can mean that you are less likely to tilt, right? And that's a little bit of a extrinsic, like not clear cut benefit that you might actually get from doing more cardio regularly. Now, this is all just, I mean, giving you all these like, oh, these are important things, but the point of this talk is strength. So why strength? improve your posture, decrease risk of injuries, and you get jacked. And so let's talk about the first one, improving posture. When I say it improves your posture, it doesn't actually just fix your posture. To me, posture is a habit. But if you're not strong enough in the muscles that control your posture, you're not going to be able to stay in those positions for very long. You're going to fatigue, those muscles get tired, and eventually you're going to revert back to positions that you're more comfortable in which you don't have to be actively holding yourself up. So if you can improve your strength and improve your endurance, you're going to be able to maintain good posture for longer, right? Um, let's talk about the risk of injuries. So in my experience in working with competitive gamers and all that, the number one issue that most people have when it comes to injuries is usually a lack of endurance. So the most common injury that I see in PC gamers is muscle overuse or tendinopathies, that kind of stuff. So extensor tendinopathies, trapezius irritations, those are the most common things, right? Usually people talk about wrist pain or forearm pain. It's not nerve in general. Most people think of carpal tunnel as being the most common injury, and it's actually very, very rare. In my entire time working in esports, I've never seen true carpal tunnel. That's how rare it is. The more common nerve irritated is the ulnar nerve, but that's a separate thing. So the most common injury is extensor overuse, which is the muscle that runs on the backside of your arm. It's responsible for lifting your finger when you click. And so a lot of times those muscles get really fatigued when you're playing for a long period of time, you're clicking a lot, and they get irritated. You end up getting extensor tendinopathy, or more commonly known as tennis elbow. That's a very common injury in gamers. So the way that you prevent that is by actually strengthening those muscles, building up capacity, so it allows you to do what you're doing without it being as much of a relative strain on that muscle. So that's why I say between all three of these, if I had to pick one thing for more gamers to do regularly, it'd probably be strength and cardio, actually. And a lot of what you see online is always telling people to stretch, which is important, but not the most important, in my opinion. So let's talk about strength. What constitutes strength? A, resistance. You will not build strength unless you are exceeding the capacity you are used to. So you need to go as heavy as possible while maintaining good form at the desired number of reps. And so when I say heavy, this is a relative term. There's no such thing to me as heavy or light. For someone who's like me, I've been training for most of my life now. Heavy for me is very different. It's a very different number than heavy for someone who just started training, right? So heavy is relative. It doesn't matter. There's no such thing as, oh, that's heavyweight, that's lightweight. What matters is what is the most weight that you can do with perfect form for the desired rep range. And the rep range is what matters. The rep range is what determines the signal to your body for what it wants to change, right? If you go very, very high reps, you're signaling to your body that I want to build more endurance. If you go low reps, super heavy, you're signaling to your body that you want to be able to move more weight and you want to get stronger. So when you think about picking resistance, you want to go as heavy as possible with good form, and reps is where it matters. Now, this is kind of a very gray area now in terms of reps. Old research used to say 3 to 5 reps is for strength, 15 plus is for endurance, 8 to 10 is for hypertrophy or muscle mass gain. And you'll probably still see a lot of trainers and stuff like that kind of regurgitate that online. But newer research, and they've done systematic reviews on it, which is a very high level of evidence, suggests that as long as you hit failure, there's going to be a similar amount of muscle gained at the end of 6 months or whatever. It doesn't actually really matter. What matters is that you're hitting failure. And so this actually ties into a little bit about what bodybuilders have discovered on their own since like the 60s, which is you need to train muscles to the point that they can't do more. You need to exceed what they're used to doing. So it signals to your body that your muscle is incompetent and it needs to grow more muscle tissue in order to be able to accomplish the tasks that you're putting in front of it, right? So what matters is failure. Now, for every single person, that's going to be different depending on how much you can tolerate. Some people like enjoy the pain and they'll go for like 15 plus reps before they fail. Some people, it's like you're starting to already feel like you're failing at 5 to 10. Just stop there. All that matters is that you are pushing yourself a little more every single time you train. I usually suggest 5 to 10 reps if you're unsure, 8 to 12 if you're newer to lifting. And the reason for that is that by doing slightly higher reps, you can do slightly less weight. There's an inverse relationship between the amount of weight you're doing and the desired reps, right? I mean, that's common sense. The higher weight that you're going, the less reps you're going to be able to do. So by decreasing the weight a little bit and going for more reps, you can focus more on your form and you can focus more about doing everything correctly if you're newer. And that's usually what I recommend is default to kind of making things lighter, but really, really practicing the form. All right. And then rest. So this is important because they used to also suggest specific rest times like, oh, rest for 1.5 minutes or rest for 30 seconds. It actually doesn't matter. What I look at rest as is the amount of time recovering in order to get to a certain level of fatigue. So if I'm trying to build endurance, I want to rest a lot less time. I don't want to start my next set when I'm fully recovered. I want to start when I'm like 50% recovered. So it starts to actually train your body to build that endurance. Now, if I'm going for strength, I usually rest until I'm fully recovered because I really want maximum push on every single rep. So if you're trying to build muscle, I usually recommend resting to get about 75, 80% recovered. You feel like I'm not totally fresh, right? I haven't sat there on my phone for 15 minutes, but I'm not completely gassed out when I'm starting my next set. And that's how you're going to start pushing yourself. Usually, 3 to 5 sets is the goal, right? At least 3 sets. I think anything less than 3, you're just not really creating enough stimulation in the muscle to grow. But I'd say 3 sets of 10 is a very, very easy, basic starting rep range that will pretty much guarantee you some results if you're pushing yourself. And here's some examples, some basic exercises I think are good for gamers. Pronated curls. So it's a curl where you're doing a bicep curl with a dumbbell, but your hands are facing downward, your palms are facing down. This trains those forearm extensor muscles I was talking about. When you're doing these, you want to try to keep your wrists straight and neutral the entire time. This is going to build the endurance of those mouse clicking muscles. The bent over row. So this is another easy one with dumbbells. You're going to bend over, try to keep your back straight, and just think about pulling your shoulder blades together. This trains not only your back, your core, and all that, but the muscles that you're using to pull the weights up are the postural muscles that help keep your shoulders back when you're playing and stuff like that. It builds in endurance of all of those back muscles that people typically need to sit with good posture. And then squats. This is just an easy one because in general, like it helps work on those postural muscles as well. You're still trying to work on keeping your back straight, shoulders back, and everything. But by working your hips, your trunk, your glutes, and pushing into a standing position, you're actually kind of reversing some of the positions that you're in all day when you're sitting too long. So I think these 3, if you were just to do this, it would take you less than 10 minutes a day, but it would significantly improve just your overall body strength, endurance, and all that specific to what you're doing when you're sitting in a chair all day. All right, let's talk a little about periodization. If you guys have questions too, feel free to drop them in chat. I'm happy to go back early too before we get to the Q&A. If anything, I went too fast or didn't make sense, whatever. But periodization is essentially a term that is talking about when do you sequence your training? How do you cycle? Do you go heavier, lighter? When do you want to peak, basically? So I usually recommend that for high-level gamers or competitive esports athletes or whatever, the times that you train the hardest are in off-season and early season. You don't want to have your physical training match the intensity of your regular season when you're gaming. And there's reasons for that. When you are pushing yourself in weightlifting, right, you're doing heavy weightlifting, there's a strong stimulus in your body to change, which takes energy. And if you were using, if you're asking your body to build a lot of muscle, you're going super heavy, you're doing a lot of powerlifting, whatever, it's very fatiguing on your central nervous system. And so usually what you'll find is like the first day after like squatting or deadlifts, whatever, you sleep like a baby. You need so many more hours of rest to recover because your body's trying to rebuild, which is incredibly taxing energy wise. So you don't want to be doing that when you're going into like playoffs or something, or you have a major match coming up, right? For those of you who aren't competitive yet, you're just playing ranked, like you don't want to do super heavy strength training or whatever the day before you're about to play your rank up games. Like you're just going to be at a more fatigued state. Your central nervous system won't be firing as quickly. You're going to actually notice that reaction time and all that's going to be slower. So I usually think about trying to do your heaviest training when it's the least important in your gaming side and you flip it, right? So as you get into playoffs, as you get into competitive season, whatever, like rank season starts, you really want to grind, do a little bit less intense training, do a little bit to stay up with it, but you don't want to be pushing yourself to, try to spend energy in multiple directions. And yeah, you taper off when intensity of gaming demands increase. So as you get into playoffs and all that, you want to taper off a little bit. All right, So yeah, that's basically all I had in terms of content I wanted to share with you, or like concepts I want to go over. I'd like to leave the rest of the time basically open to you guys. If you have any questions, we can talk about specific exercises, whatever you have. We shouldn't look to go into failure with periodization in mind. You should not be going to complete failure during periods of time that it's more important for you to be focused on your gaming. So, like for context, are you playing competitive, or are you playing um, like what's it called, Premiere or anything in the playoffs of the league I'm in on CS, for example? Yeah, so I would not be doing super heavy strength training in playoffs. I would just taper off. I would do like cardio, stretching, light strength training, just enough to keep yourself going, you know? But I wouldn't be trying to max out or PR during this time. Once playoffs are over, then yeah, then you train as hard as you can, because you can take a mental break from the gaming side. And I highly recommend that, right? After the most stressful period of your gaming, you want to give yourself like a week off. Like take that mental load off, spend some time doing other stuff, really push your body, and then you're going to find that you come back to the gaming stuff more refreshed. You're not going to be as burnt out from how intense this season was. Also, good luck in playoffs. Yeah, yeah. You know, it's important to stay physically active. I don't want to make it sound like, oh yeah, don't do anything, but you definitely don't want to go as hard as you can during that time. What type of cardio do you recommend the most? So when people say cardio, they usually talk about running. I think if you don't like running, don't do running. Running is only enjoyable for people who enjoy running, right? So cardio just means that you need to get your heart rate up and maintain it for 20 minutes a day. And if you want to do, you know, let's say that you're someone like me, I hate running. I like lifting. But if I wanted to do cardio, I could do a lifting circuit and just give myself really minimal rest time, and it will get my heart rate up and maintain that for 30 minutes or so. That's enough cardio for me. So it depends what you enjoy, right? If you like swimming, you can go swimming. If you like running, you can go running. If you want to do just weightlifting, just, you know, think about doing a day where it's specifically for cardio and you're not doing as much weight, but you're doing a circuit and you are trying to basically just give yourself minimal rest so that it gets your heart rate up. If I was to pick one, if you have no preference, I think swimming is very good for gamers, mainly because it puts you in a kind of a lengthened position. You're using your shoulders, using your arms, and it's very low impact. So, but I also hate swimming personally. I'm not a water animal. Do you find stretching is super beneficial? So I don't generally stretch before I lift heavy. I do light mobility, so I'll stretch, but you don't want to hold stretches for very long before you lift. When you stretch a muscle, it actually inhibits it. So you'll never see elite athletes do a ton of stretching before they play, because it decreases the force production of the muscle. So you want to stretch for like less than 10 seconds at a time and then lift. If you want to do longer stretches, you do it after you train. But stretching is very helpful when you are tight, right? So if I've been playing for 4 or 5 hours and my traps and my neck are super tight, I definitely want to stretch that out, because that's basically your body signaling you that it's already kind of exceeded its capacity and it needs to stretch. You should always learn to listen to your body, but you don't want to do a whole bunch of stretching before you do things in general, because it actually decreases force production of the muscle. For gaming, usually what I recommend before you play is range of motion movements. So, what I call like tendon glides or finger tendon glides, those kinds of things. Let me actually switch my camera back here and I will show you guys. Um, there we go. All right. So these kinds of just range of motion movements are very helpful. Not only do they kind of work you work the joints and the tendons through full range, which kind of warms them up. It also brings blood flow to your wrist and hand, which helps a lot. You don't want to just do a whole bunch of static stretching where you're holding the stretch until it's already tight. Yeah. So something I've told a lot of players before is what I call the jellyfish. You do like jellyfish motions like that. Do some wrist circles, open, close. Yeah. Earlier you talked about periodization with the concept of having set time of competing with my competing time as far in the future, 3 to 6 months. Okay. So that's fine. Usually then you just think of like your micro periodization, which is you can push yourself as hard as you want in general, but let's say that your regular season, right? Let's say you play matches on Friday, Saturdays. You don't want to train super hard Wednesday, Thursday. You want to save your hardest training for like Sunday or Monday. So you have a couple of days of recovery, and then you play your games, and then you go heavy again. So always think of like giving yourself adequate break times, right? Going into those days too. Now, if you're just talking about like it's 3 to 6 months away and you're not doing anything until then competitively, then it doesn't really matter. Just train as hard as you want. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, okay. Any other questions, guys? Otherwise, I will end it there. I really appreciate you guys taking some time to learn some stuff, and hopefully it helps. All right, awesome. Take care. Have a good rest of your weekend, everybody.